This show is sponsored by Set for Life Insurance, the ultimate client experience in the insurance industry. Are you looking for the perfect insurance coverage that suits your needs? Founded in 1993 by President Jamie K. Fleischner, Set for Life Insurance specializes in individual life, disability, and long-term care insurance. As brokers, they represent numerous companies in the industry, ensuring that their clients get the best products at the most cost-effective rate.
What sets Set for Life Insurance apart? You'll enjoy special discounts, priority underwriting handling, and even exceptions in the underwriting process. So why wait? Contact Set for Life Insurance today and let them be your insurance partner for life. Visit their website at www.setforlifeinsurance.com or call them toll-free at 1-888-553-3559.
Finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, and no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Well, good morning, I guess good afternoon to Steve Feldman, who's joining us from the East Coast, and we're here on the West. So happy to have you join us on BS Free MD today to talk about mental health issues and resources. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I don't know a lot about your background, just from how we sort of met online on the matching system, but I did read, that you yourself had recovered from addiction, and your journey kind of began in the early 90s. And now you're working for a big company, CEO of Feinberg Consulting, which helps people with mental health issues and crisis work, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, just about your story and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. I really, if we work backwards on it, I am part of a company today that helps families and individuals in some level of crisis, whether it's mental health, addiction, complex medical issues, or in many cases, it's a combination of one, two, or three of those things. And the real basis of what we do is to get in and get an understanding of what's going on and come up with a plan with recommendations on how to help family systems and individuals really kind of break a cycle or break a path that's not going so well. And it's pretty interesting because it wasn't necessarily by design for me, that conscious design anyways, that was how I got here. Because I have my own story and own background of challenges with mental health and addiction. And without going into a whole long bit of detail, up until the time I was 31, one of my greatest coping mechanisms was being able to use drugs or alcohol or other behaviors that really helped relieve pain, avoid difficult situations. It became a coping mechanism. And in April of 1992, the damage from my behavior and my addiction and my choices got me to the point where I needed to get help, and it was time. And I was very afraid of what that was. I felt I was very alone. I've heard the term that fit me very well as I was terminally unique, but when I came to find out that wasn't really the case. And when substances were put down, there was a level of clarity that began to come, and there's a level of connection and dealing with other people in recovery and recognizing that I really wasn't alone. There was also a tremendous amount of relief in being able to be humble and not have to pretend that what was going on with me wasn't going on. And, the journey has been a very interesting one, and learning about myself and changing and transforming and really becoming somebody who was always so interested in being able to help others. But it was really hard to help others when I was in a position that I wasn't really helping myself. And my professional journey has been in a lot of different entrepreneurial businesses. I've been in everything from a family importing company with eyeglasses to construction. I was a renovation contractor doing residential additions and home modifications. Then I opened up a chain of yoga studios that in Michigan and also on the West Coast. And through all of that, gained professional experience in what it was from opening, building, improving business. And I also had my own journey along with my personal recovery of what it was to improve and get better as a human being. And in 2011, I started a consulting business, and that consulting business was really about coaching and helping businesses improve. And I met Feinberg Consulting, my now partner, Pam, who is a nurse who founded this company and initially was providing case management services for people who have been injured in auto accidents. So a lot of brain injury and spinal cord injury and other medical complexities. And Pam was really looking to expand the types of services provided beyond medical case management. And what we recognized is that there was a tremendous need to help support people with addiction, to support families suffering with a family member with addiction. And then so much of that grew into mental health, where today, it's not a clear-cut line. There is so much mental health that is part of everything. And what we've really done together and built as a business from a place of love and compassion and dignity, how can we help provide services for families that are looking for guidance, support along the way? So somehow my professional business and my personal mission and love intercepted. And today, and it's been that way for almost a dozen years now, been working to help create access for as many people as possible that want to get help. So in short, I wasn't looking for the most profitable way of doing business and landed on this one. Somehow the passion for helping people and being able to share the gift that I was given. And that gift is a gift of recovery and a gift of hope and really a life that has joy and meaning in it today.
So I want to back up just a tiny bit. First of all, I love this because it's super inspiring to hear somebody that could meld business with a personal mission. I love that. And not just passion. I mean, passion's great, but this is bigger. This is about other people. Sometimes we get so caught in the weeds. You listen to a lot of, Instagram influencers or whoever, and it's like, live your best life, live your best life. Well, part of living your best life is actually trying to make somebody else's life better. I think that's really the central key that we miss. Let's talk just a little bit for our listeners about what case management is and why it's so incredibly necessary. From the medical side, this has been a newer thing with medical homes and the way insurance has been kind of morphed, where you might have a nurse that kind of manages the case. The problem I see with it inside the medical system is it serves the medical system. It doesn't necessarily serve the patient. In other words, when the social worker comes to see you in the hospital, they're navigating you out of the hospital and potentially into rehab so that you never come back to the hospital again. That's the hospital's mission. I used to be a hospitalist, and you would get a knock on the door and it's like, how can you get these patients out of here? Well, I'm a doctor. My job isn't to get people out of the hospital, it's to make sure they're adequately treated. But that was never the question. It was like, how do you get these people out of here? So I'm actually really encouraged to hear that there's businesses like yours that want to do case management from the outside. So if you can walk us through briefly exactly what that looks like if a client came to you and said, hey, I'm having trouble managing my dad. He's demented. He's got, he's had bipolar disorder. Now we don't know what resources are in the community. I can imagine a million different scenarios, and I'm sure you've seen most of them.
So you bring up an amazing point, because when you talk about what case management is, it really depends on the perspective that you're looking at it from. And we have often wanted to name it something else. In fact, our website is called Feinberg Care, and we define what we do and what we provide as Feinberg Care, which distinguishes what typical case management is. So I'm going to speak about it from the perspective of how we see it, and also how the stakeholders see it. Because case management as care coordinators and advocates for the family or the individual is not covered by insurance. And our company is privately paid. So in that, we're looking at things through the lens of, let's gather as much information that we can on what has been done, what the current situation is, what history is, what family relations are, really a complete view of what the current situation is, so that from that we can see what has been working, what hasn't been working, what's been missed. And our job really is to look at it completely neutrally. What are the tests that may have been missed? What is the level of care that may be optimal? And really look at it through the ability to not be tied into one size fits all. So truly everything is customized. The process is the same, and the process really is doing this thorough assessment, being able to then provide recommendations, and those recommendations are informed by what we feel the right level of care is. Those recommendations are informed by specific providers that provide that care, because we have made it our job to meet as many providers at different levels of care around the country, to vet them clinically and ethically and understand what their strengths are and understand what kind of clients don't work there. And then in many cases, it's also to recommend the type of strategy that we're going to use to get that person to say yes, because in many cases, they're not raising their hand to say, I want help. And it's really working with the family system and the family members on how we can best get the recommendations put into a position so that they can be implemented. So truly, we are guides that are shining a light out in front of the family to be able to help understand what it is that we want to be able to accomplish and how to get there.
So I'm thinking, first off, I have all these questions now about exactly what your company does. But let's start from the point of what you just said about for reaching sort of that hope. Like, what's the first step in getting, so if it's somebody personally reaching out, it's like, I need help, or a family member, what is sort of the first step to sort of getting motivated or getting help? Other than just picking up the phone or typing in your company online, any suggestions to sort of help other family members or yourself as far as where to begin?
It's really interesting, especially with addiction and mental health. There is an energy for the person suffering as well as the family around, that somehow tomorrow it's going to be better, or somehow something is going to be different. So there is this energy of, let's wait and see rather than take action. It's scary and it's frightening to confront this. But if you were to say, what's one thing that you would recommend to help people get started, it is to begin the conversation and not put off what is really challenging today for a conversation tomorrow in hopes of some different outcome.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I just find that really interesting because, you think if somebody was given a cancer diagnosis, even a skin cancer diagnosis that, potentially is not very meaningful, obviously not talking about melanoma, but just, squamous cell, it's full on panic mode. It's like, how soon can I get in? When can I get a procedure? Let's map this out. I'm going to fight it, which is great. I mean, all that is fantastic, but somehow when it's the secret that everyone knows about, except the person that has the problem, well, whether it be addiction, mental health issues, etc., it's just like, yeah, well, dad, that's just dad. He's just the obnoxious drunk guy at Thanksgiving. And, that's just who he is. Somehow that's acceptable. But, the skin cancer on your nose is the worst thing in the world. And it is just, we made fun of this. And strangely, we have another show that we do called Doc Tales with Cocktails, believe it or not. And we do that on Wednesdays and kind of make fun of things. And I talked about how, we treat mental illness, even in jest, in an entirely different way than we treat other medical diagnoses. And I was talking about, we went, a friend of mine and I went on a motorcycle ride, and we found this bar called Crazy Owls. Like, why is that okay? You wouldn't call it Cancer Owls or anything like that. And so there is this weird sort of almost mystique that goes with these problems that can be dealt with. They're dealt with differently. They have different challenges, but ignoring them just makes it worse.
It is the stigma around it. And somehow there is this something attached to the stigma that it is a moral failing or weakness rather than something that, as you bring up, the disease model. And a big part of what we want to do, and for myself has been for a long time, like, I want to put it out there that I struggled miserably, and it didn't get any better. Things didn't shift until it was addressed. And it was addressed. I mean, I went into treatment and went through early recovery, and it was an intense model. And I say it, I just turned 62 a couple months ago and passed half my life sober. And as much as that pain was for a really, really long time, it is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And it's hard to see that in active mental health or active addiction. And hopefully, and it seems this way, that more people are talking about it, and it is being more normalized as something that we experience, especially through the effects of the pandemic and what has happened as a result of so much isolation and fear and anxiety that has been created from this. But you say it perfectly, that any chronic disease needs to be addressed through a medical lens. And we really feel the same. If there is the ability for somebody to reach out and address this and confront it, as difficult it is in the beginning, it pays off in the end. And the converse is true. The longer it's pushed off, the worse it gets.
So I'm thinking of sort of any tips or tricks for family members, people that are trying to help loved ones with this. We talk about the turning or wording it in the fact that it is medicalizing it so that people accept it more. I guess I'm thinking sort of even in our own circle of friends and belief systems, or someone, say, who really thinks it's a moral failure. I'm thinking in terms of like a spiritual background. You're a Christian, and it's like, well, this is a sin. This is a stumbling block. You can call it a medical problem. I think it's more of a mental, emotional sin problem. And, someone who's, how does a family member say, okay, you can think of it that way, but still turn it into wording or verbiage, or try to get them to understand the medical component of it, I guess, in a way that just gets them help. Like, part of me is like, honestly, how would I tell my family member? I don't care what you call it, even you think it is.
Well, what if it is just a moral problem? Like, if you're sleeping around, you're destroying your family.
Right.
That's a moral problem. Like, it doesn't.
We see as far as like patients that struggle with this, and not to, as a Christian, not to judge the whole background, but it's like it becomes this bigger stumbling block in a way than if you could just simply medicalize things. So I guess any tips or thoughts on that?
Yeah, listen, it does not let this behavior be okay.
Right.
It does not, it's not an excuse, right? And everything that happens in somebody's recovery, they need to take ownership of decisions and behaviors that were made. So there's a difference between somebody's behavior and decisions and who they are as a person.
Yes.
And shame has become one of the really big components of the cycle continuing. To answer your question, that what comes up for me is the first thing is education. There is information and research available on addiction and mental health that we don't get in mainstream. It's not delivered to us. We didn't get it, and most don't come across it unless there's something big that's happened. And the other part of this is my own self-care. Because if I have an empty tank, it is impossible for me to operate in a way that's going to be helpful to others. So what happens in many systems is everybody is empty, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt. And from that place, emotion rises. And a lot of times emotion is anger, is fear, is resentment. And if you look at those things as the things that are present in the environment, what's going to grow from anger, fear, resentment, jealousy is not anything that's real healthy. So part of and most of the time when we get contacted, it is from families. Part of what we want to help families do is to realize that they're an important part of this, and how they are being is super important. So that's why, and I said it earlier, right? Loving, dignified, patient, compassionate, those are the kinds of things that are important. And it's not easy to just access that because somebody said it. There are behaviors of sleep, of nutrition, of helping others, of exercise, of mindfulness that help fill the tank. So education and self-care are a couple of things that are really important, to get back to your question of a few minutes ago.
Sure.
Well, you're 100% singing from our hymn book. That's for sure. I mean, if you've seen any of our other episodes, we have gone down these paths in numerous ways, and it's just amazing. I guess, there's a sweet spot that I think you're referring to, because, we've called out a lot of the medicalization of everything. And there's a part of medicalizing things that I think is really dark. You look at, just for instance, the overuse, in our opinion, of SSRIs. It's like, you're sad, here's a pill. Well, maybe you're sad for a legitimate reason that you need to walk through with a counselor or a coach or your family or your best friend, or maybe it's your cruddy diet, or maybe it's your destroyed microbiome, or one of the 18 gazillion, sources of disease in the 21st century. And so there's that side where we kind of take these unbelievable issues of human suffering and commoditize them because we can build a pill. Well, behavioral medicine is different than treating cancer. They both may be diseases that the medical model can help with, but they're dealt with in entirely different ways. And I just love to hear this, because coaching through the system, or case management, as the industry would put it, is so critically important, because different people need different pieces of the medical pie. Some people may need actually more medications. Some may need to get off of all their medications and do a more rigorous exercise program, a more rigorous counseling or coaching program. And, that's something that me as a physician, it's virtually impossible for me to bring that kind of gestalt to care. I mean, the insurers would love it if we did that, but then we ask to do that and then they don't pay for it. So it doesn't really matter.
Well, and think about in your training, how much training did you get in really addressing and learning about addiction and mental health as a medical physician?
Well, we actually, the training we got was all we had one of the only medical schools that had a hospital-based psychiatry. Like we had to actually do in-hospital call for psychiatry
and for residency. So we're in a unique situation.
But it was all medical because these were unbelievably sick people that needed to be acutely medicated because they were having a psychotic break. That's not the family where their patriarch of their family, who maybe, built a fabulously successful family business, is coming off the rails because finally, after 40 years of addiction, he's driving the train off the tracks. I mean, that's a common problem with which we got essentially zero training. That would be the answer to that question.
Yeah. And in the lens of the medical model, especially treating it with medication, there's a whole lot of reason and motivation that it continues that way. And most of that is around the monetized model. And what is really important and challenging is to be able to take a step back from that. Because the other thing that we haven't talked about yet that can underlie mental health and addiction is trauma and untreated trauma. And it's really hard to treat trauma when somebody's actively in addiction. And it's also really hard to treat trauma when the only intervention is medication.
I just had this conversation with a coworker last week, and we had just interviewed Martha Rosenberg, who's an author and a journalist. And she used to be a copywriter for a pharma company. And one day, she's writing some ad and she's like, does this medication work better? And one of her bosses said, we don't care if it works better. We just care that we sell more. And she's like, okay, I'm done. So then she went down the wormhole of looking into, drug studies and training herself on all of this kind of stuff. And she was talking about the medicalization of the military and how you can't be on an SSRI or any mental health drugs and enlist. Yet, what did she say? 1/6 of all active duty service members are on an SSRI. And you sit there and you go, there's something about this that doesn't make any sense, because most of these people didn't come in with a pre-existing mental health condition. Some obviously did. Why do they have a mental health problem? Because they were traumatized. So now we're trying to band-aid significant mental health trauma with combinations of medications that, especially in young men, may actually make them worse. And you just sit there and it's like, how come we don't have the best counseling system in the VA? Like that's a national security interest, is to have these, and yet there's studies that show peer counseling in trauma, in shared trauma, where only somebody that's been to war can understand war, is one of the most powerful resources you have. Yet it's a 10-minute visit with a psychiatrist. Here's some pills. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Just keep fighting. And I'm just like, my God, that is just horrible.
I hear you and agree with you. And, part of what we believe is that medication is very valuable in many cases. It is not the answer.
Absolutely. I've said that to patients numerous times. This is not the answer. It might be part of the answer, but it's not the answer.
Our system allows for, especially in these acute cases, to become safe and medically stable. And those things that's not treatment. That's stabilization.
Right.
Yeah. And those really have gotten blended. And so much of this is backed by where the trail of money comes.
Yep.
No, good point. to that, because that's what the whole purpose is. And, when, from what you asked about our experiences, a lot of what we did, and especially in the urgent care side, when people come in and it's always crisis time, is what I call a Band-Aid moment, where it's like, okay, here's some medication to help with your withdrawals. Here's some medicine to help you calm down. But or you're struggling with your mental health. But ultimately, this is just your like a crisis moment solution. Yet people go, oh, well, I got this. Forget the rest.
Yeah, I don't need the Jack Daniels anymore because I have the Xanax.
Yeah.
It's not really a solution to a problem.
But really what happens, even without a benzo, is that when somebody starts to physically feel better, they equate that with being better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, addiction and mental health is one of those things that is constantly on your shoulder trying to tell you that you don't have it. Yep. So when I have some experience of feeling better, or if I'm a family member and I'm watching somebody in my family all of a sudden have a couple of days or a week that they are doing better, that doesn't equate to healing, and that doesn't equate to recovery. And that is one of the challenges that exist.
Oh, that's really well said.
No, you need to say that. I'm sorry, you need to say that again. That is so. Let me try to get this right. You said most people in addiction or mental health issues, when they start feeling better, they equate that with being better, where the demon is still on the shoulder. You might have just punched him in the mouth for a couple days. If that sounds correct. I love that.
I believe that internally there's different characters. And I believe that the voice of addiction, and oftentimes the voice of mental health, has an agenda to be able to do what it wants when it wants. And when that voice is loud enough, the mental health or addiction is active. And recovery is when that part of the voice becomes less than 50%. And recovery really is about quieting that voice. It never goes away. And the objective of that voice is to get me to do what it wants. And in many cases, that comes out of it's a patient voice. And in many cases, what happens is it's wanting me to throw my hands up. Either I'm angry, I can't deal with this anymore. I'm fearful, I can't do this, I got to do something else. It's constantly wanting to play on emotion to make a decision to behave in a way that is not in my best interest, but in the motivation of that voice.
So I'm curious how many, is there just data, or I think that there probably is, or stats out there about how many times people have to, I guess, and it probably depends on the issue, right? Whether it's drugs and alcohol or mental health, but how many times people have to recognize that pattern of, oh, I thought I was doing better because I felt better and I thought I had it under control. And is there an average amount of times of stumbling? Like in quitting smoking, we know it's 7 to 10 times that people attempt and try to quit before they. So we would encourage them, don't worry if you fail, keep trying again. But how about in this situation, where is there a certain amount of stumbles and falls and people pick themselves up till they go, oh, I keep thinking it's going to get better and it's not? Or does that matter?
Yeah, I can't tell you statistically. Okay. I know that there are all kinds of statistics that are kept, and depending on where they come from, a lot of times they're slanted towards what those numbers are needed to be. What I will tell you is that I believe that there is input that equals output. And there are certain things that are recommended to help somebody in recovery that provide assurances, the best assurances, that either a slip is avoided, or if it is, it's easy to get back on your recovery square. And those are some of the things that we talked about with therapy, with exercise, with nutrition, with sleep, with connecting with other people, with being accountable for your word and being of your word, those things are very, and also the type of mutual support groups that are out there, whether it's AA or NA or Buddhist recovery or smart recovery or celebrate recovery. There's all different types of things that bring people together. What we believe is that if the actions are following what recommendations are, there in many cases are much better results. And back to what we were saying a minute ago, if I'm feeling better after going to these meetings and going to therapy and exercising, sometimes the brain wants to say, okay, I don't have to do it as much because I'm better. And then I stop those behaviors and I start to slide.
Which is interesting because one of the things we have called BS on repeatedly, and we have interviewed lots of different, dietary advisors, physicians, personal trainers, is that it is motivation. And this idea that you have to be motivated. Well, obviously motivation is important, and there's a certain amount of it that you need to just get going. But really what saves people is ritual. The people that I go to the gym and see that have been at the gym for the last 15 years and still look amazing and are working out, and now they're 15 years older, it's not because they feel super motivated to go to the gym every day. It's because it's a ritual, and it's like taking a shower and brushing your teeth. And, I'm kind of hearing the same thing with regards to recovery. And it kind of blew my mind when this thing came out, a gazillion elections ago when Bush got his DUI, and it almost, changed maybe it did change the outcome of that election. But it was interesting because I heard an interview with him later, and somebody said, what's the first thing you think of? And this is 25 or 30 years later. What's the first thing you think of when you get up in the morning? He said, I get up and I go, I'm not drinking today. And I'm like, what? And I go, okay, I get it now. It's the ritual. It's the going to the gym. It's the taking the shower. If that's what it takes to stay sober, that's a pretty small price to pay.
Well, listen, what you place value on is what gets done. The analogy to how important is oxygen, right? Like it becomes, you hold your breath for 30 seconds, a minute and a half. All of a sudden, there is nothing else that is important. And what you're really speaking to is commitment driven versus feeling driven. And when you look at people that have excelled in any area of life, on Wednesday morning when they wake up and they don't feel like it, whatever the ritual, the non-negotiable is put in place, gets done anyways. Because if I am going to operate on feelings, when I don't feel good or feel right or I'm tired, then I'm going to back off. And when I back off, it becomes easier to stay backed off. And that's where that voice starts to get leverage. It's looking for its way in. They talk about it in recovery circles, like that voice is out in the parking lot while you're trying to get better. It's doing push-ups. It's looking for you.
Oh, good point.
No, this is just spectacular. I want to shift gears, and May can disagree with me, but I want to shift gears a little bit into, where do people, if like, do you work across the country? Is it just in Michigan? How does this work if somebody is like, I am at my wit's end, I can't get the answers from the healthcare system, I really need help? What does that look like?
So we have our corporate offices outside of Detroit in West Bloomfield, Michigan. And we also have an office in South Florida in Delray Beach. We have people that work with the company in different parts of the country, and we work nationally as well as internationally. Depending on the situation, a lot of things are able to be handled virtually or telephonically. In many cases, it's a hybrid of, depending on the acuity of the situation, There are times where we'll do a lot of work initially virtually, and then we have staff that will travel as needed to address and help families walk through different situations. We have a number of people on our staff that are trained as interventionists working with addiction, behavior, and mental health. And in many cases, it is preparing a family and coming and meeting in person, and then helping that person say yes and transporting them to wherever it is that they agreed to go to begin a new journey. So
Wow.
The short answer is we work all over.
So that's incredible. So to that point, someone could physically come out to your location, want to help with that transition and get them into, say, a recovery center more locally, that you would sort of work in consultation with to help with arrangements and all the logistics, because sometimes family members are so overwhelmed, they don't know where to begin. From a physician's point of view, I was just going to say, like, how many referrals do you get from the medical side? Because we are stuck. We don't usually, patients often have more resources than we do because of other friends or referrals as well. So that seems to be the biggest issue, is finding somewhere.
It's a combination of the medical community, the mental health community, and the treatment providers, all as professionals. We also get a lot of recommendations and referrals from professional services like lawyers or financial planners or that type. And then there's also past clients or past families that we've worked with, or personal relationships of people, learning about what it is that we do. The physician network has been the most difficult. I'm not going to say the most difficult, is difficult just because the model that the physician is working on is their time is money. And there are billable activities and non-billable activities. And so much of that is also driven by what insurance pays. So as busy as physicians are, in many cases, it's hard to get a full ear of what's possible. We do have some really great relationships with physicians and physician practices that will get us involved.
Do you do a lot of stuff with youth or anyone under the age of 18? Is this adults only, or is it all ages?
It's all ages. We work with adolescents through older adults. Our youngest is probably 12 or 13, and we've helped get some people in their 80s into recovery. And those are some of the most beautiful stories.
Wow.
Where great grandpa, before he passed away, was able to make amends with family and be with family in a way and have some amazing things happen. It's happened on multiple occasions.
That's amazing. So when your website,
I didn't know talking about a consulting company might bring me to tears. This is
it.
awesome.
When talking about addiction and mental health and family healthcare crises, can we touch on that family healthcare crisis stuff? Does that go beyond addiction and mental health? Does it involve, I don't know, like dementia care, or because that can be a big crisis?
Well, cancer, stuff like that.
Yeah, we have a lot of experience working with dementia and older adults, and also coordinating care with complex medical issues with providers or centers of excellence around the country. And in many cases, with complex medical comes mental health challenges. And
Right.
in many cases with complex medical and addiction, complex mental health and addiction, there are medical things. And our staff has nurses, nurse case managers, as well as mental health professionals that are all licensed clinicians that are really collaborating together. So, some of the things that are unique about our company is the fact that there is this medical component and mental health. And the other thing that we're super proud of is I believe we're the only case management company in the country that is Joint Commission accredited.
Can you explain to our listeners a little bit about that? Just that JACO accreditation.
Yeah,
what
you
it
say
means?
Joint Commission in Oregon, and it's a dispensary. So
Yeah.
clarity.
So to be clear, it is an organization that it was the vision of my partner Pam Feinberg to have that gold seal. And that gold seal is that we have the Joint Commission comes in and has standards that they review and provide feedback on, and have you live up to a expectation of policies and procedures and reporting of how to be safe and effective in what it is that you're doing.
Right. Perfect. So it's not just Steve and Pam's fly-by-night consulting company that
Right.
refers to all their cousins and
right. Like May and I are going to give ourselves the Medical Podcast Award of Excellence. There's these companies that just, National Sleep Society. Who made that up? Oh, Mike Lindell did. Wow.
Right.
I don't know if he did, but I mean,
it is a powerful,
right.
especially in the industry, to have that, and it is a lot of work to do the upkeep of that, and it's really important.
We've gone through several Joint Commission audits with a former hospital we worked at, and we know exactly this is an industrial commercial colonoscopy.
What was really interesting is that before the first one, and I think it's been almost 6 years now that we have been Joint Commission accredited. Before the first one, we had no idea what to expect, and there was a lot of nerves about it. And it was a really amazing experience to be able to be validated for what it is that we're doing, and then also to have the experience of this organization provide feedback and suggestions of things that we can do to improve, and really use that feedback to become better at what we do.
Well, that's
awesome.
That's what we've noticed, is that everyone freaks out because the toaster is in the wrong place, and they in the break room, and we're going to get dinged. But generally, the feedback that we've gone through in hospital meetings is usually very constructive. So it tends to be a lot of anxiety for something that really shouldn't be. If you're doing everything mostly right, you're not going to have a problem.
So let's talk a little bit about, I think this is important, where people can try to find the right, like you said, find the right guidance. I mean, they might not all be able to come to you. It would be nice, right, for you and our listeners. But if someone, so to speak, really does Google a search of where to get help for someone locally, how do people know even what is a good system, a good place? Any thoughts and tips on what to look for when seeking help?
Yeah, it's really challenging because there is so much when you Google, and being able to recognize what the real abilities of a facility are and what the real intention of a facility are. There's so many unbelievably great providers across this country, and there's also, like in any space, players that are not so great. And the one thing that I would say is to try not to rely on internet search as the sole information, and the willingness to be able to be open with those that you can be, to see if others have had experiences or can make recommendations of people that can provide help. There are support organizations for family members that exist out there, and in the world of addiction, there's Al-Anon and different 12-step groups that people have experienced some of the same thing. And it is really not being alone that I think can be helpful.
I just think back to doing family practice many years ago, but it was tough even just to keep a current list, but we would usually try with our local resources, psychiatry offices, counseling centers, church organizations, and keep that together. But it's always fluid and changing. And so sometimes it's helpful to contact your local family practice or medical provider's office. But you're right. A lot of times it is kind of networking just to different systems and asking instead of obviously Googling in a search.
It's interesting because this always brings me back to this patient that I saw several years ago who was drinking too much, and she came back 2 or 3 weeks after I'd seen her the first time. And what I said to her when I saw her this initial visit is I said, everyone's broken. We're just all broken differently. And she came back and she said that was the most encouraging thing she had ever heard. And I think that, really, from my perspective, if you kind of distill down what we're doing in recovery and behavioral health, is you're going to struggle with something. You're either going to struggle with the substance and the hangover and the withdrawals and the God knows what that goes along with all of these things, or you're going to be struggling effectively to get better, to stay in recovery, to stay mentally sharp, to stay with your exercise program. So this idea that, and we've had people refer to us, they're like, well, you guys don't struggle with anything. It's just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, if you actually crawled into my brain for 20 minutes, you'd figure this out. We're all struggling. It's just that we need each other, and we need professional help at times so we can struggle effectively. And if we have learned anything in this internet, smartphone world, is this isolation kills people. And, COVID just poured gas on the flames. Yeah. It's don't struggle alone. Get with other people, get with humans. When we see the effects on our own adult children on how their social groups are so formative in just making them really cool, fun people to be around. And it's just, I don't know that either of our kids really does social media at all. Mm-hmm. And it's just like their lives are so much better than so many of their peers. It's just
what you're really bringing up is, don't judge somebody's exterior compared to your interior. And everybody is walking around with challenges. And I would say that one of the greatest qualities to walk around with is humility. And humility says that I'm going to ask for help, that I can use help, and that I don't have to put up a front. And behind that front is where a lot of pain and struggle exists.
No, absolutely. And I think all of us, like yourself, but people that have struggled with stuff, is just to be open and humble, but to share that, whatever your small community is, with someone else, and not to be embarrassed by it, because that secret that you think is a secret is that everybody's struggling, and how effective we can be in helping other people's lives just by sharing our own struggles. I believe that's what we're here for. But to encourage people who have struggled through that to reach out to someone that they.
Well, and it's amazing the power that these people have that have come through this. We interviewed Theron Fleury, who's was a former NHL professional hockey player, won a gold medal, won the Stanley Cup, and he talked about how he was raped 138 times in 3 years by his coach, and how that turned into this, half his life was addiction, and what it took to recover. And now this is a guy that would show up, drive from the bar to hockey practice and score 3 goals that night as somebody who's like 5'6", 160. Like, this is superhuman abilities drunk. Yep. And then to hear his story of redemption, and one of the key things that he said, which was absolutely stuck with me, is secrets kill. Mm-hmm. And they really, really do. And, May was brought to tears because she brought her own story of how she was abused as a child by a teacher, and, how that was so secret. But now that she has come out and she's spoken about it, obviously, to patients and, on the podcast to the whole world, it's just how powerful that is in essentially the redemption of other people, which we believe is kind of our job.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I love what you're doing. It's, I think, a starting place for somebody who literally doesn't want to type in a Google search and it's like, where do I even begin? Because it is daunting. I mean, I just had a friend recently reach out for help with a teen, and even being out of the network of that, I'm kind of clawing and grasping too. So, can you share with everybody your website and how to get how to get a hold of you?
Sure. The website is feinbergcare.com, feinbergcare.com, and our telephone number is 248-538-5425. My personal email is steve@feinbergcare.com. Feel free to reach out.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes so people can, click and get in there. And this, I've said this, I don't know how many times, but it's just amazing where these conversations go. This has been a real delight. I mean, it's just, I can't hear this enough times on how important it is to own your life, to own your struggles, and most importantly, for a lot of people, just to ask for help.
Yeah, I agree. And at the end of an hour of hanging out with you guys, it feels like we know each other really well. This has been a joy.
Thanks again, Steve, for being here. We really appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you.
No matter what your insurance needs are, Set for Life Insurance has you covered. They're a nationally recognized leader in disability, life, and long-term care insurance, serving clients across all 50 states. Their dedicated team specializes in assisting medical residents, physicians, dentists, business owners, and other high-income professionals. Bye-bye.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.